Romans chapter 1, we read that Paul introduces himself to these believers. And he writes that he's been set apart. He's been called to deliver a message not from man, but a message direct from God. The message is concerning Jesus Christ, who is Lord. The message that I preach is the message God gave to humanity, spoken by the prophets, recorded in the scriptures, that he would send one who would die for the sins of humanity. If you listen to the prophets, if you study the scriptures, you will conclude that Jesus is the Messiah. The first argument that Paul uses to present his case is that Jesus fulfilled the prophecy of 2 Samuel chapter 7 and verse 12, that the Messiah would be of the lineage of David. Paul writes to these believers, Jesus is a descendant of David. Matthew writes in chapter 1 and verse 1, now this is the record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, who is a descendant of David. These writers understood that the only way that they could present Jesus to be the Messiah is to present the evidence. Matthew will start his lineage in chapter 1, starting with Abraham, while Luke will give the lineage of Jesus, starting with the first man of creation, Adam, in chapter 3. Paul writes to these believers, I give you a message direct from God. This message was spoken through the prophets in the Holy Scriptures. And the evidence I present to you is that the Messiah was to be born of the seed of David. It would suffice if Paul ended there, but he continues under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and he writes according to the flesh. This indicates that if he was made flesh, then he was of another nature. When you study the genealogy record given by Luke chapter 3, Luke writes Joseph, the supposed father of Jesus. Matthew, in his record, writes in verses 17, writes, and Joseph, the husband of Mary, the mother of Jesus, who is called the Christ. Both writers give no credence to Joseph being the biological father of Jesus. This is important to the context of our study as to why Paul writes according to the flesh. When you study the scriptures, you understand that Jesus is divine. Matthew chapter 1 and verse 18 records the birth of Jesus before Mary and Joseph came together, that is, had any sexual relation. She was found to be pregnant of the Holy Spirit. Why is this important to know? Because you have to read the words of Paul. Paul writes, everything I tell you concerning Jesus, who is the Messiah, is found in the prophets who spoke, who recorded the words in the scriptures. The prophet Isaiah wrote, chapter 7 and verse 14, speaking of the Messiah, therefore the Lord himself shall give you a sign. A virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. If you turn to chapter 9 and verse 6, Isaiah identifies that the Messiah would be the mighty God, the everlasting Father. Jesus fulfilled the prophecy to be born of the seed of David, but he also fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah that he would be divine.